Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Samantha Weston was the kind of woman who turned heads wherever she went. She had this confident way about her, like she could carry the whole world in her hands without showing any weakness. With a brilliant career in the medical field, she earned respect not only for her expertise but also for her assertiveness. Her steady voice and elegant bearing were striking qualities that could captivate an entire room whenever she spoke. Still, Samantha secretly felt an emptiness that no promotion or achievement could ever fill. She hid it well, covering up the unspoken truth about her marriage, a cold, emotionless routine with Patrick, behind a professional smile. Patrick was basically her opposite in almost every way, calm, kind, maybe even too patient. He never raised his voice, never got into arguments. He was that reliable, steady husband who made breakfast every morning, took out the trash at exactly 8, and watched TV on the couch until he fell asleep every single night. Samantha, however, saw all that as monotony and mediocrity. Inside her, a dangerous feeling was growing, a conviction that she deserved a lot more than the life she had. The perfect chance for change showed up when she was invited to a prestigious medical conference in Spain. It was one of those grand events held in luxury hotels with spectacular views of the sea, where renowned experts from all over the world gathered for lectures and workshops. Samantha felt almost teenage-level excitement as she packed her bags. That trip represented much more than just a career opportunity. It was her chance to finally break free, even if only for a few days, from the life that always felt the same. When she arrived at the conference, she felt the impact immediately. The main hall was packed with doctors and scientists of international repute, but among so many serious, busy faces, Samantha noticed someone who easily stood out thanks to his magnetic presence, Dr. Daniel Moretti, known not just for his brilliant intelligence but also for having a dangerously seductive reputation. He had an easy smile, light-colored eyes, and a confidence that could rival Samantha's own. From the first moment their gazes crossed, it was as if an inexplicable magnetism had drawn them together. Between lectures, Daniel struck up interesting conversations, showing genuine admiration for her work. For the first time in ages, Samantha felt valued. With Daniel, she could finally let go of that mask of perfection and admit things she'd never share with Patrick. She opened up about her dreams, her frustrations, how she sometimes felt suffocated by the weight of everyone's expectations. As the days went by, their interactions became more intense. Casual encounters in the hotel lobby evolved into long conversations under the stars, accompanied by expensive wine and genuine laughter. Samantha let herself be swept up by the captivating attention of a man who seemed to understand her in a way no one else ever had. Daniel hung on her every word, making her believe she'd finally found someone who could fill the void slowly consuming her. After an upscale dinner with soft music playing in the background, Samantha gave in completely to the dangerous feelings that had been growing inside her ever since the trip began. For the first time in years, she let herself live without thinking about consequences or calculating risks. Passion drowned out reason, and that night, in the forbidden comfort of Daniel's elegant hotel room, she made the biggest mistake of her life. The days passed, and on the last day, she felt a strange, unsettling mix of pleasure and guilt that was hard to put into words. Staring at the white ceiling of the luxurious hotel room, Samantha replayed every detail of the 3 intense nights she'd spent with Daniel. It hadn't been just a momentary lapse or a fleeting slip-up, it meant something deep, enough to change the course of her life forever. The sense of freedom she'd felt at his side was now making room for a quiet, almost suffocating guilt. She took a deep breath, trying to convince herself that everything would end right then and there, in that far-off country, with no one ever finding out. While packing her suitcase in a rush that morning, Samantha wrestled with the conflicting emotions taking over her. Daniel showed up in the room to say goodbye, as calm as ever, giving her only a kind smile and a warm hug. There were no promises or demands, just a silence they both shared as two adults fully aware of what they'd experienced together. Leaving for the airport, Samantha left Daniel behind, thinking her life would go back to normal, as though those nights had never happened. But during the entire flight home, she couldn't shake a constant unease, her heart squeezed by the quiet fear that somehow her secret might leak outside the walls of that Spanish hotel room. When she finally landed in her hometown, she ran her fingers through her hair, took a deep breath, and walked toward the exit, trying to appear just as confident as ever. Little did Samantha know that the brief chapter she'd lived in Spain was only the beginning of a chain of events that would deeply shake her life, toppling everything she'd built up until then. When Samantha slowly opened her front door, she immediately caught the familiar scent that had always comforted her, a gentle blend of lavender, fresh coffee, and the clean, subtle fragrance of a space Patrick kept spotless. She paused there for a moment, taking in the scene that should have felt secure. The living room was organized exactly as she'd left it before her trip, like nothing had happened, like those days in another continent were nothing more than a hazy memory. Patrick appeared soon after, wearing that polite, reserved smile she knew so well. He walked calmly toward her, carefully took her luggage, and kissed her on the forehead, just like he did every time she came home from a long trip. His voice was soft and relaxed, almost musical as he asked how the conference had gone. Samantha felt a pang of guilt spike through her, but she swallowed it down, answering him briefly, leaving out all unnecessary details. That first night after she got back, everything seemed exactly the same. They had dinner at the usual table, with Samantha's favorite dishes perfectly prepared by Patrick, just like always. Their conversation was light, filled with small talk about the weather, mutual friends, and minor neighborhood news. Nothing in his demeanor seemed different, no clues, not the slightest change in his gentle, familiar gestures. But behind that calm front, Patrick was hiding something dark, something way more complicated than Samantha could ever have imagined. In reality, his composure covered up a devastating discovery. A few days earlier, while she was still in Spain, Patrick had received an unexpected message that would change his life forever. Helena, the wife of Dr. Daniel Moretti, had been suspicious of her husband's behavior for a long time and decided to hire a private investigator to confirm her suspicions. After getting the first photos of Daniel and Samantha's affair, Helena quickly figured out who the other woman was on that trip. Shocked to discover Samantha was also married, Helena tracked down Patrick and sent him a detailed collection of pictures, intimate conversations, and undeniable proof that both their lives were being destroyed by the same people. Patrick received it all in silence, sitting in the dimly lit home office, reading and rereading every message, studying each heartbreaking photo. Each piece of evidence cut into him like a sharp blade, every shot of Samantha in another man's arms felt like a personal insult, an unforgivable betrayal that slowly ate away any compassion or mercy he might have felt. The initial pain gave way to a cold, calculated anger, so deep he showed no outward sign of it when Samantha arrived. He made up his mind right then, his response wouldn't be impulsive or emotional. It would be a coolly laid-out plan. She didn't deserve to know he knew. Not yet. In the nights that followed, while Samantha slept peacefully next to him, Patrick stayed awake for hours, meticulously plotting every step of a revenge that would make her feel all the pain he felt, but multiplied. There would be no scandals or immediate confrontations. Patrick knew Samantha hated conflicts, she valued comfort, stability, and most of all, her flawless reputation. So those were exactly the pillars he planned to tear down, with no warning and no way for her to defend herself. Patrick quietly started dismantling everything she considered secure. The luxurious house they lived in was a treasured inheritance from Patrick's parents, something Samantha had always taken for granted. With total calm, he sold it fast, signing contracts and making agreements in absolute silence, so she wouldn't suspect a thing. The shared bank accounts, carefully built up over the years, were drained one by one without any notice or alert. Patrick also gathered every shred of evidence of the affair. Photos, messages, dates, hotel details, he collected it all into one organized file. Each page was a nail in the coffin, every piece of evidence a calculated blow to the pride of the woman who'd betrayed him so blatantly. While he prepared his quiet vengeance, Samantha, clueless, went on with her normal routine by the side of the man she had underestimated for years. She never noticed the subtle chill in his eyes when she was distracted by her phone, nor the almost mechanical way Patrick said goodbye each morning before leaving for work. She naively believed her life was intact, that everything was perfectly under her control. And so, as the days went by, Patrick patiently waited for the exact moment when every piece of his elaborate plan would slide into place. He watched Samantha from a distance, concealing his emotions, biding his time until the day she'd feel the ground vanish beneath her feet. Everything was ready, planned in silent, almost frightening calm. Samantha kept smiling, thinking she still had complete control, totally oblivious to the harsh truth about to blow up in her face. Samantha carefully parked her car in her reserved space at the hospital that morning, adjusted the rearview mirror, took a deep breath, and glanced at herself. Her expression was serious, determined as usual, but a strange restlessness had been building inside her, a vague feeling that something was off. Even so, she straightened her white coat, squared her shoulders, and walked briskly to the main entrance, ready for another hectic and demanding day. The moment she stepped through the automatic doors, she instantly sensed that something had changed in the environment she knew so well. The corridors, normally filled with laughter, friendly chatter, and warm greetings, now felt tense and quiet. It was an uncomfortable silence, heavy, like everyone was sharing a secret Samantha wasn't supposed to know. A few people she usually greeted every day suddenly looked away, acting like they were overly busy with papers, clipboards, or even just the walls. Colleagues she'd known for years rushed past her in the opposite direction when they saw her coming, avoiding her gaze. Samantha felt strangely exposed, uneasy, like she was walking on thin ice without knowing why. Trying to ignore the growing anxiety, she headed straight to her office, looking for some kind of temporary refuge in familiar territory. But before she could even close the door, the hospital's general director, Elizabeth Parker, along with 2 board members, suddenly appeared in front of her. Their faces were serious, grim, almost stern. Elizabeth Parker, who'd always treated Samantha with respect and admiration, now looked at her with a cold, unforgiving stare. In a few words and a very professional tone, Elizabeth said they needed to talk right away, but not there. Samantha tried to hide the slight tremor in her hands and silently agreed, following them down the hallway to the meeting room at the far end. That short walk felt like an eternity, as if time had slowed down on purpose just to torment her. When they got inside, Samantha saw a folder spread open on the table with several photos laid out. Her stomach turned instantly, her heart pounding wildly as she recognized her own face in those images, moments that were supposed to be private and absolutely off-limits. Right there on the table, for her bosses to see, were the undeniable proofs of her biggest secret, her forbidden affair with Daniel in Spain. She slowly sat down, desperately trying to keep her composure while Elizabeth explained, in a cutting tone, that those photos had been sent anonymously to all the board members, as well as to trusted colleagues and, worst of all, the hospital sponsors. The words that followed were a death blow. Due to the moral and ethical severity of that public exposure, Samantha was immediately suspended until a thorough investigation could be carried out. The silence that followed was deafening. Samantha tried to defend herself, but her voice, normally so firm and self-assured, faltered miserably. The looks of disappointment and judgment from the people who once admired her hurt more than any official punishment could. Right then, in that painful moment, she realized that her outstanding career, earned through years of dedication and personal sacrifice, had just collapsed in a matter of minutes. Escorted out to the parking lot so as not to cause any more embarrassment, Samantha couldn't help but notice how the stares grew more intense in the corridors. Discreet whispers trailed behind her, while colleagues pretended not to see her but watched every step, like witnesses to the humiliating downfall of someone they used to look up to. At that very moment, in a different hospital in a nearby city, Daniel Moretti was going through an equally devastating ordeal. Called in unexpectedly to the director's office, he was hit with the same accusations. His professional pride, built on years of reputation and respect, instantly shattered in the face of the public exposure of his affair with Samantha. Those same pictures were shared with his medical team, his superiors, and even the institution's key investors. In one moment, everything he'd spent his life building went up in smoke. But for Daniel, public humiliation wouldn't be his only consequence. When he got home that afternoon, he found Helena sitting on the living room couch, surrounded by neatly packed suitcases. She'd known everything for days, but had waited until that very moment to reveal that she was done. There were no shouts or fights, she just calmly stated that she'd reached her limit, made it clear their broken trust could never be fixed, and walked out without a backward glance, leaving Daniel alone with the wreckage of everything he'd once held so dear. Meanwhile, Samantha was alone, in the awkward silence of her parked car, trying desperately to figure out how her life had fallen apart so dramatically and so fast. The world, which only hours ago seemed completely under her control, was now swallowing her into a bottomless pit. A lost job, a ruined reputation, and the deep shame of it all were open wounds she never thought she'd have to deal with. There, in that nearly empty parking lot, Samantha finally felt the cutting pain of the consequences of her own actions. Samantha stayed put in her car in the hospital lot, feeling like the world was slowly collapsing on her. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it echoing in her chest as she tried, and failed, to calm her breathing. Her mind spun with chaotic thoughts, and then a horrible sense of panic hit her. Patrick. My God, did Patrick get those photos too? Does he already know? That possibility was enough to snap her out of her paralysis. She started her car and sped out of the parking lot, hands shaking on the steering wheel, heart racing, tears streaming silently down her face and smudging her carefully applied makeup from that now distant morning. While she drove through the familiar streets of the neighborhood, she pictured the worst-case scenarios. How would Patrick react if he'd received the photos? Would he still be at home? Was there any way to explain all this without him leaving her? Every street felt longer than usual, every red light increased her desperation, as though fate was putting off the unavoidable showdown. Finally, she turned the corner onto the quiet street they lived on, and her heart dropped at the sight of something she never thought she'd see. On the sidewalk in front of the house, neatly lined up, were all her suitcases. The very same ones she used for traveling, now coldly packed with her clothes and personal items, set out like a silent, devastating message. She slammed on the brakes, shut off the engine, and rushed out, nearly tripping in her haste to reach the front door. Her heart was pounding so loud it felt like it would burst as she approached, desperate for some explanation or any chance to fix the mistake she'd made. When she reached out with a trembling hand to the cold doorknob, she found the door wasn't even locked. Pushing it open slowly, Samantha saw Patrick standing there in the entryway, waiting calmly like he'd known she'd arrive at that exact moment. His expression was completely serious, with no trace of the gentle smile she was so used to. Patrick's eyes were ice-cold in a way she'd never seen before. They didn't belong to the patient, easygoing man she used to know. Patrick, please, let me come in, we need to talk, she managed to say with a shaky voice, taking a hesitant step inside. But Patrick firmly, without showing any emotion, raised his hand slightly as a clear sign for her not to come any closer. No, Samantha. You're not coming in. Patrick, please, I can explain everything, it's not what it looks like, it was a huge mistake, I swear. He cut her off, his tone icy and unyielding, you don't need to explain a thing. I've seen all the photos, all the messages. Daniel's wife made sure to send me everything, every detail of your huge mistake. There's nothing left for you to say, Samantha. My lawyer will be in touch with you soon. Patrick, please, don't do this. Give me a chance to talk to you. I know I messed up, but let me apologize, just once. Patrick stayed still, his gaze hard on her. Your things are all packed in the suitcases outside. I put enough clothes for a few days. If you want, we can schedule another time for you to pick up the rest of your stuff. Today's not possible. Overcome by desperation, Samantha tried to keep the door open, terrified of losing any hope of redemption. Patrick, I'm begging you, don't close that door, don't do this to me. I need you, I need to ask your forgiveness, please, just hear me out one last time. He took a step back, keeping his eyes on her, though for an instant a brief flicker of sadness seemed to cross his face before he spoke with finality. You should have thought of all that before you destroyed our marriage. There's nothing you can say now that'll fix what you did to me, Samantha. Nothing. Without giving her another chance to speak, Patrick firmly shut the door, leaving Samantha outside, staring at the solid wood that now symbolized everything she had lost. The dull thud of the door echoed in her ears like a final sentence resonating in the quiet street. She stood there, feeling totally unmoored, hearing only the painful echo of Patrick's final words. Her breath was ragged, tears now streaming down her face, and in that moment, she realized the full weight of her choices. Everything she'd taken for granted, his calm presence, silent kindness, unwavering loyalty, was gone, leaving her alone on the sidewalk with her suitcases lined up like one last, wordless show of contempt. Alone, humiliated, and devastated, Samantha finally understood she'd crossed a line that could never be erased, and that the life she'd once known was lost forever. Samantha sat on the lumpy bed of the cheap hotel room she'd rented with the little money her friends had loaned her. The place was modest, far from anything she was used to. The peeling walls, worn-out mattress, and weak yellow glow of the nightstand lamp were constant reminders of her new, bitter reality. The feeling of vulnerability grew by the minute as she stared at her phone, rereading the message she'd just sent to Patrick over and over. Patrick, I need my things. I need my jewelry, the art pieces I bought with my own money. Please answer me. The awful wait for his reply felt endless. Every second stretched into an eternity of silence. Then, finally, her phone buzzed in her lap. Her heart pounded as she opened the message, but Patrick's words were ice-cold. After we sign the divorce papers, you can come get what you say is yours. Until then, don't contact me again. That cold, distant response was more painful than rejection itself. Samantha realized she had completely lost any control of the situation. Patrick was unwavering, firm, and there was no room for apologies or second chances. All she could do was wait and accept his conditions. In the days that followed, the loneliness and anguish became her constant companions. Samantha barely slept, consumed by anxiety and regret. When the date arrived to sign the divorce papers, she dressed simply and showed up early at the lawyer's office Patrick had chosen, desperately hoping she might get one last chance to talk or at least beg his forgiveness face to face. When Patrick walked in, Samantha tried to catch his eye, craving some hint of compassion or regret. But he never looked at her once. His face remained emotionless, cold, like she wasn't even in the room. He signed every paper quickly, without hesitating, handing them to the lawyer as if this were nothing more than a minor transaction. Samantha felt a tightness in her throat, stopping her from speaking, and she just signed too, recognizing right there the official end of her marriage. The next day, still reeling from the divorce, Samantha sent another message asking when she could finally go collect her belongings. But this time, there was no reply. Hours crawled by, and the silence remained, crushing. Out of patience and desperate, Samantha decided to drive to the house to settle everything in person. She pulled up in front of the home that had once been a symbol of her status and security. But the shock hit her instantly. The place was completely empty, abandoned, with a huge "For Sale" sign posted outside. In a daze, Samantha jumped out of the car and walked up to the entrance. She peeked through the window and felt a deep ache in her chest at the sight of a bare, vacant interior, no furniture, no paintings, none of the things that had always been there. The overwhelming feeling of loss almost took her breath away. Disoriented, she slowly sank down on the front steps, trying to make sense of what had happened. Just then, the neighbor who used to give her a polite nod from afar came over hesitantly, sympathy plain on her face. She told Samantha that Patrick had left the state, taking everything from the house. A chill ran down Samantha's spine. She now fully realized that Patrick had planned all of this with terrifying precision. Desperate, Samantha asked if the neighbor knew anything about her personal items, clothes, shoes, jewelry, the things that held deep emotional value for her. The woman looked down, clearly uncomfortable. Samantha, I'm so sorry, but I don't really know. I just know he donated a lot of things over the last few days. Those words hit Samantha like a definitive sentence, a sharp punch to the gut that left her stunned. Tears welled up, her body shaking at the cold ruthlessness of such a calculated, quiet revenge. Everything she'd ever thought she owned, everything she'd once built up with pride and arrogance, had just vanished, wiped out by the carefully orchestrated payback of a man she'd underestimated for years. Still sitting on the curb, she recognized a bitter truth: this wasn't just punishment, it was a harsh life lesson. Her arrogance and blind certainty that she was above any repercussions had led to the destruction of her entire life. Every selfish choice she'd made was like a brick in the ruin that now surrounded her. Without a home, real friends, a job, or dignity, Samantha realized in that moment that there was no way back. Actions inevitably have consequences, and she'd have to live with that painful truth for the rest of her life. Surrounded by emptiness and utter silence, she finally understood the devastating extent of her own choices. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.